I hate it when I support someone's position on a gender thing or something, but they're so over here that I'm like, dude, I don't even want to talk to you about it. I actually support your position, but because your lens through the world is like everything, like, why is this pad white? Like,
I support your position. Now being a jerk about it.
Because white ink would be really expensive. I don't know.
When I informed people that I was doing a movie, that I was writing a book about 80s teen movies, I got two reactions. 90% of the reactions are, "Oh wow, I love those movies," or "Oh well, you must be talking about John Hughes."
Yeah.
And I say, "Well, sure, of course, I'm talking about John Hughes." And then 10% of the reactions, actually, my favorite in that very small group of reactions was, "Please talk about something other than John Hughes and his racist ass." and personally, I don't think John Hughes had a racist ass, but that did change my entire thinking about that story. In that the narrative of this very small segment of popular culture I was looking at was not simply what my experience had been as an upper middle class white person living in the Midwest, i.e. exactly who John Hughes had in mind when he was making those movies, because I was essentially one of his own children. I was the same age, same background, all of those kind of things. And so I started looking around and saying, okay, well, what are my elements here? Teenagers, movies, a certain time in history. And so I have a whole chapter about horror movies. I hate horror movies. I scare too easily for horror movies. So I had to watch a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street on Wednesday with the lights on and all of the shades. But more importantly, I have a chapter on the first generation of hip hop movies.
Yeah.
Because those were all movies starring teenagers.
Yeah.
And then of course when I dug around, I found out that House Party was a Sundance film. So House Party comes along in Sundance at the same time as Sex Lies and Videotape, at the same time as the beginning of the American independent film movement, and so it's part of this multiple narrative in American cinema, which is a far more diverse, multicultural narrative than we typically think of.
And do you feel a responsibility as a member of the media to keep perpetuating that? Because I know to change that narrative in a way that is, because I do. I'm just saying, like when we have little opportunities, even to do like an illustration on a playlist, on a talk, we will put in a brown face or we'll put in a woman, not because the talk is by or that all of the playlist is by Black people, by brown people, by women, but because God damn it, people should see their faces. And it's just these small decisions that you make over and over and over that, it's a sense of responsibility of moving the needle on this one American issue that I think is playing out in a lot of media platforms in a very small, sort of low, this is like junior staffers making these decisions. Right. This is not, the CEO going, and the CEO cares about a lot of things, but this is junior staffers going, I want to see me on this, I want to see my friends represented in a way that, so it's another thing that I think about when I'm hiring too, is like, how do I make sure that at the junior level, at the very, very basic level, we have people who have skin in the game to represent the America that we want, the country that we want.
Something that you were talking about earlier is this concept of success and what it is and like how we define it. And something I've been thinking of, and this is the only time I've ever really talked about it outside of my wife, is this, I think the medium in which we live today with the internet and all this, I think we're too close to successful people. Because it almost looks like it almost feels like it's attainable. Like I can tweet at Elon Musk, and if on the right day at the right time, he might tweet me back. Whereas back in the day, rich people were like way up somewhere. You didn't know any rich people. Like you didn't even know hardly that they existed. You just knew that somewhere in this far off land, there's rich people. and everybody around you was like you. But today I feel like with the medium of what we see, it's like, oh, and then it's also, then it makes it look easy, right? Like, oh, Elon Musk, like, he worked at PayPal, no, all of a sudden he has all this money, he makes these cars and rockets. It's like, oh,
he tweets, I tweet. I must be a genius.
he walks, I walk. So I feel like something that's really set us up for always feeling like this imposter syndrome shit and all this stuff is we have too many other people to look at now and be like, and put ourselves up against. But it also makes it too close when you're like, well, man, if I wanted to meet, CEO of freaking Pizza Hut, I can be at South by Southwest and just meet him. Whereas back in the day, like, my dad didn't meet the CEO of the freaking Pizza Hut, right? Like, he had no chance. It wasn't even around for him to even, those people lived somewhere, I guess, and they were never around. They weren't on the train with me or anything. Whereas today, it's different, right? And I feel like there's a proximity to successful people that makes everybody feel like they're never good enough and that they always have to work harder, because you see somebody like Elon Musk tweeting at 3 a.m. and you're like, well, I should be up at 3 a.m. I should get up to 4 a.m. And it's just like, no, that's not it. That's not how this works.
I don't know quite how to put this, but I feel like there's an equally poor access to unsuccessful people.
Yes!
And what I mean by that is...
Please!
There are the majority of people in this country will never feel like they could actually run into the CEO of Pizza Hut at South by Southwest, because the majority of people in this country will never, ever go to South by Southwest. They'll never even have a shot in hell of going to South by Southwest. Right? And literally we at this table, and many people like us, live in this bubble of not overwhelming success, but considerable success. Which that gap seems super easy to cross, right? It's like, if I just get the right job, or I give the right talk, or I post the right Medium post, or, I could jump up and then, get to build a rocket. Like, I'm so close. I'm so close. Whereas the vast majority of the country is like, what's Medium again? Right? It's like, I got Twitter, and I see Elon Musk on there. That's nice, I guess. I'm not going to tweet him. I see Kanye, I might tweet at him, but now he's broke too. But yeah, I feel like that syndrome is even more pronounced and more dangerous for people like us who have already kind of in this, let's say 10%, if not the 90%, actually have this considerable closeness, which is still very, very much vaster than it appears. And it makes it more difficult for us to think in terms of being much, much, much further away from that. True. Like, where the far bigger gap is between many, many people in this country and where we are. Because A, it's really uncomfortable to think about, and B, it's really difficult to see because of things like Twitter, because, to put it bluntly, how many poor people do you follow on Twitter?
How would you even know?
How would you even know? Exactly. How would you even know? Yeah.
I mean, there is and this is the little bit of the peek underneath the shame for me. It's like, so Black Twitter is a thing, right? Mm-hmm. A huge thing. Mm-hmm. I can honestly say that I have moments when I go, wait, how invested am I in? Like, because I'm Black. How come I don't feel like I participate? Is it because I'm choosing not to? Is it because I just don't know anybody? Is it because it's completely and utterly invisible to me? I mean, how does that fall out for me personally, right? Imagine how much harder it is for people who don't already have the sort of built-in guilt mechanism that might make them ask the question.
So we have this wonderful talk from a spoken word poet, Jamila Lyscott, and she talks about the 3 flavors of English that she speaks. And she speaks school English, and she speaks English with her friends, in Brooklyn, and then she speaks in a Jamaican patois with her parents. And we posted this talk. It's this beautiful talk, and I think it's called, my 3 languages, or my 3. I can't remember what it's called. And literally, the comments that we got were, "This is not true. This is not happening." Like, people literally negated her entire experience of living and speaking because they live in Nebraska and they don't know anybody like her, and it's simply hard for them to believe. And it was one of these fascinating commentaries, because I'm like, obviously I want all these people to just like delete. But how do we start a conversation with people who literally have no idea you know,
And
and
then you'd be negating their experience.
well, exactly.
Well, yeah.
And I certainly don't mean to make a slam on Nebraska, but
Well, no, and to your point, you're also deleting evidence, right? It's sort of like, we need to know if people in the world do not believe this thing out of hand because they have not experienced it. And I almost wonder if, like, the lesson there is, okay, they need to see it again. So there was this amazing talk at South by this year. There was a lot of gender diversity or just general diversity stuff at South by this year, and almost all of the keynotes played with it in one way or another. But one of them was talking about diversity by design, right? So if when you go to a hotel and you leave your room and the lights turn off automatically, if that is being green by design, so rather than leaving a note that says, please turn off your lights to keep the world green, it just, you know what, let's take care of that for you, right? She was talking about things that you can do from a design perspective. So, for example, very simple thing, leave the names off of resumes when you're hiring, right?
Yeah.
Knowing whether or not they're a woman, knowing whether, making assumptions about whether or not they're ethnic, right? That isn't really helping you hire, right? No, it's just leave the name off. Simple design choice, right? That is going a long way, you know, towards it. But one of the things she brings up, she shows you an optical illusion,
So smart.
right? Of a checkerboard, and then part of it has a shadow over it, and you assume that these gray blocks are in fact a different color, right?
I love that.
But it is a live pattern recognition, and I realized in our talking, this is her point, is all racism, all misogyny is pattern recognition.
It is.
I come up with a pattern that says that black people do this. If I suddenly see an outlier that says, no, black people are like this, I don't believe it because it doesn't fit the pattern. Or the whole, you don't look like an engineer when talking to a woman, right? Just that phrase, you don't look like, means that there is a look like. And that look like is a pattern. My pattern for engineers is this.
Yep.
You don't fit
look like
that
a
pattern,
founder. You
therefore
don't look
you
like
are a lie. Your experience is a lie. It does not work, right? And this is just fundamental, right? Survival skills, going back to the days when I had to be able to recognize, oh, there's a tiger there because it's not fitting the pattern of grass, right?
Sure.
Totally understandable from a reptilian evolutionary brain perspective. But once you sort of acknowledge that, okay, this is a situation of pattern recognition, there's kind of two things. One is design choices that fight that, right? Or usurp it. And then establishing new patterns, right? And saying, okay, they need to see 5 other examples of people who speak 3 different languages to 3 different groups, right? And then you see it again and again and again and again. Or they need to see that illuminated in their own lives, right? It's like the way you talk to your parents. Is that the same way you talk to your friends? Is that the same way you talk to the girl you're interested in? I don't think it is, you know? And just, you know, either find existing patterns in their own lives or just simply be shown something enough times to where it becomes a pattern.
Right. I mean, that's the question I was going to ask, because it's like how many times, right? How many times is too many? How many times is enough? I don't. Probably, given the nature of this table, probably everybody at this table has had the experience of someone kind of who you were talking with enough for them to be honest with, maybe as a friend or a new acquaintance or something like that, to say something like, you know what, you're different, and that's code for the, in my case, I know black people, I've met black people, you're not like black people. You are better spoken or funnier or whatever it is.
The word is articulate.
Yes, I know. I'm trying
Articulate.
not to say so well spoken.
If you see the movie Zootopia, there is a line in there with the word articulate that's sort of just a thing in there for people to laugh at. Most people don't get it, but oh yeah, it's just
Makes you just want to use the word like colon pal as a verb.
Right.
Colon pal.
You just got powelled.
Yeah.
But you're different from other girls. Is
Right.
What we're hearing.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. And the point there is that here's somebody who's actually taken a step, right? They've seen the different, that it doesn't fit the pattern, and they've managed to somehow subvert this whole notion of having a cognitive change, like changing the way that they think about that, and said instead, you are a unicorn, and therefore I can hold on to my pattern. So how many times is enough?
It's something that we see in criticism of Silicon Valley, you know, and certainly I see it in criticism of what we do is that same thing. And then, you know, we're pouring resources into solving dinner reservations, And not pouring resources into, affecting the lives of billions of people, and not just in a social justice way, but in a way of like, why don't you make it easier for me to cross the street? Why don't you make my problems just as easy as it is for you to get an Uber? It's such a common criticism now.
That crazy bit from Obama's talk at South by, just the one segment where he's saying, we have all of this technology and effort, blah blah blah, but we're the only country in the world that actually makes it hard for our constituency to vote. Actively makes it more difficult for.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, of
right?
course.
And we're
God forbid they vote.
Right, and we're the best example of an ongoing representative democracy in the world, right? And yet, it's easier to order something from Amazon than it is to actually cast a vote.
What's a really interesting juxtaposition of that is I was talking to some friends who live in Brazil, and in Brazil, voting is compulsory. So if you don't vote 3 times, you can have no government assistance on anything. So everything the government does for you, gone.
How do you like that?
Wow.
So it sounds great. until you're like, well, sweet, then everybody votes. So then what happens? They're like, so you have these politicians go into these really poor areas and feed everybody for a week. Because if you've been hungry for a week and you come into a poor area and feed everybody for a week, they're like, I'm going to vote for that guy. He gave me food last week. So then when you have like compulsory things that kind of encourage voting and encourage higher voter turnout, you then still have the same griminess of politics, which is like, well, then these people are like day-to-day hungry. So if I come in and do this huge thing, give them this food, they would never have a chance to get regularly this great special kind of steak they have down there. I forget the word of. And it's like, we give them all these things they would never have. They're going to remember me when they go into that voting booth. And it's just a very interesting thing to see that.
Right? Cool. And it's funny because we used to have a lot of that, right, early on. This was the argument for the middle class, right, was that you need people who can actually stand up and make reasonable decisions, who have enough free time and leisure to be able to actually, and money to actually be able to make an informed voting decision. Because what we have is all of us, like landowners and the masses. And if we're going to have a democracy, what are the masses going to do, right? Is it just going to be cult of personality? I'm going to have to stiff arm Jefferson to make sure that I run down and talk to these guys first. It's like, how does all that happen? Representative democracy is dangerous in the sense that if you can control the means by which people are inspired to elect the representatives, you control the power at the top, right? There's only a couple people.
How do you get people to vote against their best interest with the consistency that I've seen it? So like when people are like, Obamacare is bad, I'm like, wait, you have children, and those children need health insurance so that they can stay alive, but yet you are somehow saying that that's a bad thing. Would love to hear it, because I have yet to hear anything that goes like, how does that happen? Like, your poor child is sick, or you have a pre-existing condition and you are sick, and then somehow you can take groups of people and just be like, that's bad. So I would love to hear if anybody's ever come across anything, because I've yet to see anything that was compelling.
So what I would say is most of the neuropsychology research around how we make decisions, because that's the key, right? Against your best interests assumes that your interest is in fact the criteria you're using to make the decision. Very, very, very often it is not. This goes to buying decisions, this goes to political decisions, this goes to romantic decisions, right? Who are you going to spend the rest of your life with? Basically, the part of your brain that makes decisions is in the middle. It's the limbic system, and it's also where the emotions lie. Language actually comes next in the hierarchy, prefrontal, right? Like the higher level functioning, right? And then below that's the reptilian brain. It's like, oh shit, there's a tiger, run, right? Fight or flight. So when we make decisions, we are emotional about it. We make it based on the emotion afterward. Very soon afterward, we use our rational mind to justify the decision. And it happens so quickly that we usually don't even notice that that's how we did it. It's like, oh yeah, I got that Dodge Charger because it gets great mileage. So that's at the sort of abstract level. But at the more like political level, the sense I get, and again, this is the sense I get, but I'm sure there's reading to be done, especially around the Milgram's experiments. The Stanley Milgram experiments was, hey, we'll put these people in a room and ask them to shock somebody.
Oh yeah, right? I remember this. Yep.
Okay, and it was very much this thing around someone in authority tells you to do something, you do it. Okay, fine. And that was sort of like the learning. It's like, oh my God, it's so scary what you can get people to do if you look like you're in a position of authority. Someone went back and did deeper research into that and kind of segmented out that data a little bit more. And what they found was very interesting. There was a point at which people would stop obeying. And they would more or less stop obeying at the point where you basically told them, you have to. Like, this is what you have to do. Right. And it's very much and I'd be curious to see if this was just American results. It was very much you can't tell me what to do situation.
That's your reptile brain is telling you this.
Yeah. Alternately, if they told the people this is for science, right, that there was a higher cause to which they were devoting themselves when they shocked that person, the compliance went way up.
Wow.
So the sense I get is it's not about my best interest. Not my best interest is, am I part of something bigger than myself? Am I taking back my country? Am I making America great again? Right. That. Oh yeah, I'm in.
Who doesn't want to be a part of making America great?
I
do.
And the other thing, and the final leg of the stool there is my wife told me about this experiment. I think she maybe actually helped with it. She's a neuropsychologist. If people have to make decisions when they're panicked, they're much more likely to do what you tell them to do, what you tell them is the right decision. Yeah. So if they're really hurt, really rushed, and they're like, take that right, okay, they'll take the right. Or pick that thing, they'll pick that thing, right? Because they're just... So when people are economically depressed and they don't know where their next meal is coming from, they don't know how to feed their children, they're not going to sit and flip through Obamacare and say, is this right, is this wrong, is this my best interest? It's like, they'll see a guy on the TV that they've been listening to for years say, Obamacare is evil. And there may or may not be a list of reasons after that are true or not, but it won't matter. You've already appealed to my emotion. I'm under a lot of stress, and you've told me I can make America great again by fighting Obamacare. Right. That's all I need to hear. Sign me up. So I think a combination of those things is how you...
Oh, you forgot one part. And he's black.
Oh, yeah.